Today, we're getting into the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni legal feud that is now pulling in influencers via subpoenas. On TikTok, Kim Kardashian mentioning that she believes ChatGPT caused her to fail the bar exam, and how Democrats did a surprise sweep in the weeks off year elections and the implications of that for 2026. And we will be talking about the top transits of the week ahead, including November 9th, Mercury Retrograde, which began. It'll go for 20 days, and it will be most strongly felt by my mutable signs of Mercury, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. This is Aligned Weekly, your weekly mix of pop culture and world news with a sprinkle of what to expect in astrology, so your week feels informed and aligned. I'm your host, Alina Brown, and before we keep going, wait a minute. It's time for pop culture news. So, what happens when celebrity drama and legal cases turn into subpoenas for influencers? Let's talk about the case that's got TikTok creators sweating a little bit, okay? But before we do, today's episode is supported by the Auralign 2026 Astrology Planner, the planner that puts 2026's top transits in the same place where you plan your weeks. More details later on. Now, the first story, most pertinent one, is that Blake Lively has been in a legal battle with Justin Baldoni, both of their teams. And for a bit of context, both of them were involved in the creation of the movie. Oh, and both of them starred in the movie It Ends With Us, which was a romance movie that came out in 2024 and is based off of a hit book by Colleen Hoover. Blake Lively, in her legal case, is claiming that Justin Baldoni and his PR team essentially paid influencers and paid for bots to basically make her image look bad, to hurt her image, to hurt her own PR, her public relations. And for a bit of context, essentially, around the time of the release of that movie, the whole rollout, when the whole cast was doing a bunch of interviews, a lot of people started to notice that Blake Lively and the rest of the cast were doing separate interviews from Justin Baldoni. They also noticed that the whole cast unfollowed Justin Baldoni on social media. And then that was essentially it. And then some things started coming out, like how Justin Baldoni and his family and his team ended up watching the premiere of the movie in the basement there's like pictures of it. And there were a lot of people criticizing Blake Lively for promoting her hair care line during the promotion of this movie when the movie involved DV. So it felt like it was a little inappropriate. A lot of people were talking about that, right? So a lot of people started really kind of like ganging up on Blake Lively over that time period during the rollout of the movie. And there was just a lot of bad commentary and PR about her. And then at the beginning of this year, or around Christmas time, I think last year, she released an article with the New York Times, I believe, and filed a lawsuit, all claiming that Justin Baldoni defamed her and was behind bots and things to make it seem like she was worse than she was. Basically, all of that bad PR she was claiming was because he was paying bots online to say negative things about her and to like and really boost any videos that were speaking negatively of her, and that his team were paying people under the table, content creators, to speak negatively of her. And so all of that to say, this brings us to present day, where apparently Blake Lively's team has decided to subpoena certain TikTok influencers that they believe were paid under the table or could be involved in what they claim is a whole sort of like organized PR stunt to make her look bad during the rollout of the movie, essentially to protect Justin Baldoni, because she claims that he essentially harassed her on set in different ways and was very inappropriate with her. So that is essentially the story. And I think that this matters because it's forcing a new conversation about whether influencers count as journalists and how far commentary can go before it's legally risky. And I think it's an interesting conversation because, a lot of these content creators are everyday people who are like, I want to talk about celebrity news. We all like this stuff. Let me make videos about it. And now they're getting pulled into a legal battle. And it does bring up the definition of, or the distinction between basically journalism, because journalism is protected and it's a part of our right to free speech. But at the same time, where is that distinction and the protections in terms of free speech for everybody else? Were there people involved in this? And if they were involved, what are the implications of how essentially like insidious and easy to make people think that everybody believes one thing and then convince people to believe that thing because they're paying people under the table or they're paying for bots to say, this is my opinion, this is my opinion. And honestly, this, along with AI and the rise of AI, we're going to be talking about that with Kim Kardashian in the next story. I don't know. It just really speaks to the importance of just getting outside and touching grass, man, because the more that attention is consolidated on specific platforms, it basically means the more power those platforms have to, if they want to either allow it or do it themselves, sort of like cultivate a certain mindset, like what's the implications of that, right? That is the first news story. But before we continue, I just want to say hi, you guys. Hi. I feel like that part I was like on stage and now I'm off stage and I'm like I'm in the audience. I'm like, hey guys, hey, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm doing the Aligned Weekly podcast. Okay, so this is the first episode. I'm literally trying all of this out. So I want you guys to comment like what you think of it. Just wait until the end and then tell me what you think of the whole thing, different segments, because I really want to mold this to what you guys want in the same way that I molded the full and new moon forecast videos that I have done previously before this, custom to what you guys want. As of tomorrow, Halloween was a week ago, I dressed up as Stack from Sinners, and y'all, I gotta say, my costume was so sexy. I just felt so confident and badass. And I got film level sort of like stage blood, and it literally looked like real blood. I got fake vampire teeth that glued onto my canine. So it just looked really realistic to me. And so that was really fun. All right, back on to another pop culture news update, y'all. Okay, so the next story that we have is Kim K says that ChatGPT made her fail the bar exam, and the AI backlash starts to get personal. So it can be a wild week when even Kim Kardashian is blaming AI for a bad grade. Okay. It's just so interesting to hear how most college students, most high school students use AI now, and also hearing teachers' perspectives of it. But to hear that even Kim Kardashian is using AI to study is very interesting. So essentially, in a recent podcast, Kim Kardashian shared that using ChatGPT to, quote, help summarize her law prep materials led to wrong answers in a failed practice exam. So she didn't technically fail the exam, but it was a failed practice exam. Now, I think this matters because it's sparking a debate about whether AI tools are empowering or just dumbing down how we learn and study. And I don't know, there's so many implications here. For one, like I mentioned, we already know there's so many news stories about how college students and people have been studying with ChatGPT and using it, and how a lot of teachers and professors are really frustrated by it. But at the same time, and you know what, comment if you disagree with this, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like AI is going anywhere, right? And I know it's incredibly unethical, and especially when it comes to studying. Like, I know that I personally would not want to hire a lawyer if I knew that they were maybe overly relying on ChatGPT to actually become a lawyer, or even in their practice, because what are the implications of somebody who uses AI to get their degree or get a certain job? It implies to me that they're probably going to continue using it once they start working. I don't know. So there is that element of it, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like it's going away. And I'll never forget when AI really, really started picking up to the point that there were the first major reports that like a huge percentage of students were using it. I was on Reddit. I live and breathe Reddit. Reddit is amazing. I'm on a subreddit that's for teachers, where teachers comment and they share their opinions and stories. And I'll never forget reading a thread with teachers, and a lot of the top comments were essentially saying that, kind of like when Google and Wikipedia and essentially the internet, or even calculators, when those first came on the scene, a lot of teachers felt very similar to AI. Obviously, AI is like leaps and bounds, eons and dimensions more intricate and there's way more complication to it, but it's a technology that's completely reshaping how people learn, right? It's a tool that people can use to help them learn or maybe complete assignments and not learn. When the calculator came on the scene, like the scientific calculator, those bigger calculators came on the scene, math teachers were like, nobody's gonna know math anymore. You can't use it. But they realized, you know what, this isn't going away. Let's teach kids how to use it properly. Let's allow children to use it as a tool. And so now in school, that's used as a tool. And I think about that in the context of AI, and these teachers were saying, like, just like calculators and the internet and the introduction of the internet, the introduction of Google and Wikipedia, these things are not going away. So how can we, as teachers, with our core intention being preparing these kids for the real world and functioning properly in the real world, how can we maybe teach them how to use it as a tool and not as something to cheat and get and go around the process of actually learning? How can we, you know what I mean? It's kind of like the discussion around teaching children and teenagers media literacy in order to properly or more efficiently navigate the waters of the internet and be able to identify things like propaganda or things like what we're going to talk about later, which is filters on our faces. You know, media literacy can help us identify the type of ads that we see and the type of content that we see and be able to understand what is being implied, what is the subtext and not just the more overt message. Anyway, my takeaway here is that AI use as a supplement is I feel like that's the most constructive approach. I want to know what your opinion is. Using it as a supplement rather than a shortcut, and what can that look like? But let's go on to the last pop culture story, and that is a recent report that one of TikTok's most popular face filters, it's called the Bold Glamour face filter, has been essentially messing with our brains. So if you've ever opened TikTok and thought, wait, do I need my cheekbones to be a little sharper? You're not alone. So researchers released new data showing TikTok's Bold Glamour filter uses facial mapping so advanced that it alters self-perception and increases cosmetic interest. Essentially, it can increase people's wanting or curiosity around essentially getting plastic surgery or Botox or essentially trying to change their face to match the filter more. It blurs the lines between enhancement and self-identity, especially for Gen Z users growing up with filtered faces. Now, this is really interesting to me as a millennial. I consider myself a zillennial, but I am a millennial. I mean, I'm on the younger age range, and I feel like I connect with a lot of Gen Z stuff. But anyway, for me, I personally remember when Snapchat's doggy filters and all of those filters were making people want to get plastic surgery as well. When Snapchat was like the number one app, so much so that Instagram copy and pasted their features onto them. You can thank Snapchat for the 24-hour story feature on Instagram. In case y'all forgot, they literally just copy and pasted it from Snapchat. But when Snapchat was super duper popular, there were news stories just like this one coming out talking about how there was an uptick in people literally going to plastic surgeons' offices with pictures of themselves with the Snapchat filter saying, I want this. And I remember, I think it was like Khloe Kardashian mentioning that she did that too. But all of that to say, it's getting worse, unfortunately, y'all, because now there are children. Because with Snapchat, there were kids on there, but it was mainly the millennial generation really heavily using it. And most of us were like college age at that time, which is still a very, impactful age range. But with TikTok and with Gen Z and even younger Gen Alpha, they're getting to the kids even younger, y'all. And in my own personal experience, unlike Snapchat, on TikTok, there is a more subtle filter that's not the glamour filter that when you use it, it doesn't inform anybody in the sort of notes at the bottom of the video. It doesn't inform anybody that you used a filter. Whereas this Bold Glamour filter, it will leave a little tag under the video to let people know that a filter is being used. So the implications of that is a lot. I'd love to hear what your take is on the AI story, on the face filter story, self-image. It does seem like this does have deep-rooted implications on our relationship with education, in our relationship with our self-image and our mental health. But with all of that said, let's get into some US and world news. So, Democrats won several key off-year elections across states like New York, Virginia, and New Jersey this week, signaling early momentum going into the next presidential cycle. So we can definitely expect to see shifts in local policies, especially around education funding, reproductive rights, and energy usage, whether that be regulations around renewable energy or non-renewable energy, which can impact state-level economies and job markets. And this will definitely inform 2026 elections, the midterm elections. So we're going to see what happens, but that is a huge news story to cover. With that said, let's go on to the top transits for the week ahead. And you know what? Let me go ahead and use this audio for it because it's time for the top transits for the week ahead, y'all. And the number one top transit is that Mercury went retrograde as of November 9th in the sign of Sagittarius. Let's break it down real quick. So first off, what is a Mercury retrograde? Why do people freak out about it? Why does everybody freak out about it? I'm going to go ahead and dispel some stress for you right now. Right the F now. Okay, let's chill. Mercury retrograde happens up to 4 times a year. So yeah, it's going on at least about 4 times a year. Retrogrades in general, there is always a retrograde happening in general about 80% of the year, y'all. Yeah, we have 7 inner planets. I guess 5 if you exclude, the sun and the moon, which don't go retrograde. But we have those 5 major inner planets, and then we have excluding the sun and Earth, and including Uranus, Neptune, Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. We have 8 planets that all go retrograde at any given point. So first off, let's start there. Okay, let's start there. The second thing is, so let's go ahead and just break down what a Mercury retrograde is. Mercury is considered in astrology the planet that rules over our conversations, information exchange, the internet. Mercury rules over the zodiac signs Gemini and Virgo, the very analytical signs that are more chatty and very cerebral in a lot of ways. It's because they're ruled by Mercury. And Mercury also is seen to rule over travel, short-term travel, and again, communication, internet, right? Also electronics. Think of anything that travels via air, right? So, internet, Wi-Fi, but also electricity, our voice, our music, our sound. And so when it goes retrograde, that is essentially when it visually, from our perspective here on Earth, our vantage point, it appears to be retrograding back, rotating back in the night sky. Jump scare. Hey guys, so the audio cut out in the middle of me giving my Mercury retrograde overview, but let's get back to it. Okay, now that we have set the stage that Mercury retrograde happens about 4 times a year, retrogrades happen relatively often throughout the entire year. It's not necessarily something for us to be scared of. Let's dive into the meat and potatoes of this specific Mercury retrograde. So like mentioned, it began on November 9th and it will end on November 29th. This Mercury retrograde will begin in the sign of Sagittarius. So you can look at your personal natal chart and see what house in your natal chart is in the sign of Sagittarius to get an idea of what area of life will be more strongly tied to these Mercury retrograde themes. So for example, let's say that you are a Sagittarius rising. That means that this Mercury retrograde will be beginning in your first house. So the retrograde themes of circling back to something in your life, maybe double checking, making sure there isn't any sort of miscommunication, wanting to circle back to maybe properly wrap something up or review something. All of those things could pertain to your self-image, circling back to things having to do with maybe something that you initiated, something you began, a journey you started. I think I will likely do an all signs reading for every sign on my TikTok page. But yes, so in general, when we see a Mercury retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius, it can indicate for us as a collective on a mundane astrology level, essentially a lot more of these Mercury retrograde themes of maybe there being some type of hiccup or setback or a sort of almost like congestion when it comes to being in action as it pertains to more Sagittarius themes of what we're learning. There could be overarching themes, even in the news, that are spotlighting, hey, we need to kind of circle back to this event that happened a few months ago, maybe during the last Mercury retrograde. We need to reread, or let's circle back to some of the facts that were written into this one article, or this information that was shared with the world or with the country, or that everybody was talking about. And so with that said, let's get into the do's and don'ts of this Mercury retrograde real quick. Okay, so you do want to maybe reread your emails before sending them. You want to pause to make sure that you're not misinterpreting things. You want to double check travel plans. That's a big one. And I don't think it's that big of a coincidence that we in the US are having a government shutdown, which is now resulting in up to 10% of US flights being canceled. And that presenting these more Mercury retrograde hiccups of delays, of, shifts, of mistakes, of congestion in the mercurial life area of travel, and really the Sagittarius area of long distance travel. So definitely, if you are traveling, or if you're planning to travel for the holidays, any of that, double check your route, double check roads aren't closed, double check that your flight is secured, and make sure that you have the app for the airline. That way you get any updates you need to get as soon as possible. Things like that. Maybe get travel insurance. For sure. Especially with online bookings. This is like maybe ultra specific, maybe not, but think of like your traveler number if you're in TSA pre-check, or think about, like your ID number, or the name that is maybe even being auto put in when you are buying that train ticket or that flight ticket, or any of those things, and that you're not misspelling it in some way. And then you get to the counter and it's like, oh, this doesn't match your ID, or, oh, this doesn't match your passport, whatever. Just double check those things. Okay. Now, in terms of do not, in terms of things to maybe not do around the time of this Mercury retrograde, is definitely don't jump to conclusions. As somebody who I see myself as the type of person that's very good at reading people. Like I can, even in my peripheral vision, I can take in someone's energy and kind of already anticipate things. But it can be a fine line between our intuitive inklings and downloads and potentially projecting, out of subconscious things, out of implicit biases. There's so many things there. And because Mercury's retrograde, there's a higher likelihood for misinterpretation. So do not jump to conclusions before asking clarifying questions. That's been something that has helped me so much in my life over the last few years, especially with dealing with things like social anxiety. Has been like, if you have some form of anxiety around something that's going on, especially in social dynamics, don't be afraid to ask a clarifying question of like, oh yeah, hey, I noticed that when we were out or whatever, you kind of, I don't know, it kind of felt like, maybe you were upset, or I don't know if you were tired, but I just want to see if everything was cool. Ask, you know what I mean? Wow. Oh, it's like, that is like the antidote for me with a lot of anxiety, especially in social situations. Okay, now that we have talked about the top transit, before we get into the listener lounge, we're going to talk about listener stories. I can't wait for this next segment. A quick pause for something that actually helps you use the astrology that we talked about here. So the Auralign 2026 Astrology Planner takes every major transit, including the ones that we talked about. So there's a literal retrograde ephemeris in the planner at the beginning of it. So you see all of the retrogrades for the year and the exact dates that they are happening, what zodiac sign they're in, and there are notifications for it throughout the planner. And you'll see what's coming and have a place to map your goals, intentions, or even rituals around it. Now, if you're more of like a digital sort of person when it comes to planning, there's also the Auralign 2026 digital calendar that's automatically uploads these transits into your pre-existing Google Calendar, iCalendar, Yahoo Calendar, like literally in the same calendar where you already put your events and your appointments and your reminders. You can also get all of the top transits of 2026 in there with horoscopes for them. And there are also, you can also get the rising sign version of it where you get a custom horoscope custom to your rising sign. So for example, let's say you're a Pisces rising and there's a Pisces eclipse. It will give you a horoscope based on the fact that this eclipse is happening in your first house and what that means for you. And yeah, so I'm so proud of making that. I personally made that and I'm so proud of it. I'm so excited to use it myself. So you can find both linked right at the top of the show notes. Perfect if you're ready to plan your week with the cosmos instead of against it. All right, y'all, let's go ahead and get into the listener lounge. Okay. So I actually have an audio, like I have a little like music for this, but I'm recording with my phone. So I can't pull that out right now. But okay, so this is the gist of what the listener lounge is. Every week, I will give you a prompt. I'm going to ask you to either call in or comment telling me your story or your opinion on the subject of the week's listener lounge. Okay. And so since this is the very first episode, I didn't have a previous episode to give you a prompt. So what I did was I went to the community page of my YouTube channel and I asked you guys there. And the prompt was essentially, what is your new or old holiday seasonal tradition that you've implemented that you think people would enjoy? And we got some interesting answers. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up really quickly. But while I do, one of the traditions that has just like kind of organically become a thing between my husband and I that really came about over the last few years because we moved out of our home state and we were farther away from family and stuff. And it was, and it is, okay, you know advent calendars, right? You know, you can get like a chocolate advent calendar, or there's like all these different types of advent calendars out there. You can get an advent calendar that's empty, where each day is empty and you can put in something into it, whether it's a piece of candy or whatever, right? And so something that I started doing, especially because my husband's birthday is around the time of Christmas, and I really want to make sure that he feels special and that the holiday season doesn't kind of like overshadow his time, is I got one of those advent calendars, and in each day, there was either a riddle leading to like a little chocolate or a little holiday treat, like maybe a candy cane or, you know, something like that, or his favorite snack. Or there would be a riddle that alluded to a surprise date night or a surprise activity that we were going to do either in the home. It could be like some type of holiday activity where we pull out all of our Christmas records, like we have a record player and we have a bunch of holiday records, or like you get my point. Like it could be big or small. But what it did was, especially because, again, like we didn't have a lot of friends and family out here for the first few years, it helped us to create a lot of Christmas cheer that usually more easily and organically happens when you're around more family and friends that are kind of like contributing to being like, hey, let's go do that, or let's go do this. And so that has become a tradition for us this year. And each year is kind of different. This year, we are exploring every other day is somebody else's prompt. So day one, I put in a prompt. Day two, he puts in a prompt every other day. So it's kind of like an equal contribution. But that is one of them. Okay, so I see that Nadia Pink commented, we used to open gifts on Christmas Eve at midnight, right when it officially became Christmas. That is so cute, Nadia. I absolutely love that. I got another comment from I'm D Goddess. I'm pronouncing it. I think I might pronounce it wrong, but they said Dia de los Muertos, remembering and honoring the deceased. Absolutely love that. I love learning about ancestral veneration and how so many ancient societies and so many traditional holidays all over the world, even from eras where they were not in contact with one another, they all had different forms of ancestral veneration holidays where they essentially were honoring their ancestors. There's the Hungry Ghost Festival in China, Dia de los Muertos in Mexico. There are like Halloween in the West. It's rooted in Druid ancestral veneration holidays around Samhain. Or Samhain, pronouncing that so bad. I found that to be so interesting. Karate Koala 4270 said, for Kwanzaa, we don't put names on gifts. There are set Adinkra patterns on brown paper, on brown wrapping paper. And when it's time to open presents, each kid receives a small goodie bag that also has a sample of their pattern. So they don't look for their name on the boxes, but they look for the corresponding pattern. I think that's so cool. I would love to dive in deeper into Kwanzaa and the traditions there. I think that's so lovely, and it sounds like a great way to incorporate these patterns like that are, tied to the Kwanzaa culture, African culture. But I also think it's so cool that you can essentially accumulate gifts under the tree without the kids knowing whose is whose until the day of or the night of. I think that's really sweet. So that concludes Listener Lounge for this week. Part 2 of Listener Lounge is the Ask Alina segment, where you basically call in and you ask for advice. It could be relationship advice. I don't know about y'all, but I grew up on this radio show called Loveline. It came on after like 10 p.m. on Kiss FM in Los Angeles, where I grew up. And I think his name was Dr. Drew. He was like a relationship and psychotherapist. And then there was just like this radio host that wasn't like educated in psychology at all. So he would give like the lighthearted answer, and then the doctor would give a more like educated answer. And I love that stuff. So if you have any relationship questions, it could be romantic, it could be platonic, friendships. Y'all, I am 32. I have so much knowledge to give when it comes to like relationship dynamics and conflict resolution. And I've learned so much. So I would love to talk about that with you in the Ask Alina segment. This week, for obvious reasons, didn't have anybody call in. If you want to have your audio message played in the show for the next week, I already pre-recorded next week's episode, so I won't have it for that one. But if you want to hear your voice on the show and you want to, and you can ask any sort of advice question. Any advice question you want. I'm trying to aim to listen to at least 2 an episode, but I just thought that'd be so fun, So for the next one, the theme is going to be stress management and sort of like navigating family dynamics leading up to the holidays. So for the Ask Alina segment, you can leave an audio message asking for advice having to do with like, the holiday season and anything on those themes. And then for the comments, if you want to comment under this video, in your experience, what has helped you with navigating the social dynamics of holidays, parties, Friendsgiving, Thanksgiving, Christmas? I know a big thing is like, clashing politics and having to share space with people like that. But, or if you have any other holiday traditions, I would love to read those too. So go ahead and comment that. And I'm so excited, y'all. Okay, that basically concludes this video. And I want to give one quick thanks to the people who keep the show running. And that's me, low-key, because it's the Auralign 2026 Astrology Planners, the planners that I make. The planner that puts 2026's top transits in the same place where you plan your weeks. If you want your week to feel less reactive and more aligned with astrological rhythms and seasonal shifts, as well as, there's a lot of journal prompts throughout it and time opportunities for reflection, even daily. Whether you're looking for a physical planner or even digital calendar that uploads into your Google Calendar, Auralign has simple resources for staying aligned, and they make the perfect holiday gift for the astrology lover in your life, y'all. Yes. Links are in the show notes. And depending on when you're watching this, Black Friday might have already began, and we have sales of up to 30% off on so many things. So be sure to check that out. But with all of that said, the number one way to support my work here on YouTube is to just hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, comment. But if you are listening to this on Apple Podcast, I'm not sure if I'm going to get the very first episode up immediately on there, but if you are, please leave a review. That is the number one way to support this channel. But with all of that said, I will end this with my favorite affirmation, and that is, be gentle with yourself, because life is about the journey, not the destination. All right, y'all. I will see you next week for another episode of Aligned Weekly. Please comment letting me know what you think about this. My intention here is basically every single week, instead of only doing YouTube videos every other week for a full moon or a new moon only, in this format, I can do every single week, I can do a top transit every week. So for example, in this video, I got to do a deeper dive into Mercury retrograde. Next week, I think I'm going to be able to talk about the Jupiter retrograde and the new moon. It does look like a potential trade-off is that I won't be able to do all signs readings because I can't do everything. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I just feel really excited about this. So I hope you guys like it. And anyway, I'll see y'all later. Peace.